Welcome in on a Tuesday, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. Guarding Trump, the former president, back on the road today. New efforts to pump up protections after the most recent assassination attempt. Plus, our live monitors take you back to that Texas pipeline where the explosion happened. These are live images right now. We're following the work of firefighters to put this one out. This is CBS News 24/7. Let's go. Okay, so back out to that pipeline fire shortly. But first, we want to take you to breaking news about 30 miles away from where the fire burns. News coming to our monitors of a Houston police officer shot. You were looking at live images there of the aftermath. That officer apparently fired on while responding to some sort of a home invasion in this neighborhood. The officer rushed to a hospital from where the bullets flew in Houston's northwest side. So far, no update on the officer's condition. Right now, details are limited, but you can see our photographer there setting the shot to show you some of the police tape and the investigation going on right now. We can tell you at this hour there are arrests and a manhunt. So 2 people detained, and officers are now out on the streets in Houston searching for a third. As soon as we learn more live from the scene, we'll bring it to you on CBS News 24/7. Right now, though, our video monitors take us to New York, where a grand jury indicted hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. He's facing a lot of charges, is in big trouble. 3 felonies, including racketeering and sex trafficking. We're also now learning Combs is set to appear before a judge at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time to be arraigned on all of those charges. The charges come just months after federal authorities raided his homes in Los Angeles and in Miami. As part of this wide-sweeping investigation, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams outlined the extent of the crimes allegedly inflicted on both men and women since the year 2008 by the music mogul. Officials say Combs used associates, drugs, and firearms to carry out abuse. We warn you, what you are about to hear may be disturbing to some.
The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. Let me say a little bit more about the charges. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines.
So that's word from the DOJ. Meanwhile, on the other side of this story, we heard from Combs' attorney who vows to fight, digging their heels. Take a listen.
His spirits are good. He's confident. He is dealing with this head on, the way he's dealt with every challenge in his life. And he's not guilty. He's innocent of these charges.
So there you have the allegations and the fight. Let's go live now to CBS News anchor and national correspondent Jericka Duncan right there at the courthouse. We see all the press there behind you. What a day it's been. Jericka, I took the last hour to go through this indictment. It is pretty graphic.
Very graphic. Very graphic indeed. They talk about things that they say Combs wanted in terms of what he was expecting when he was having these sex acts. And it also mentioned those searches. You know, you remember those famous pictures of agents raiding his home, 2 of them. And what we heard Damian Williams say is that during that search, they seized evidence, 3 defaced AR-15s, evidence of what's noted in that initial civil lawsuit from his former longtime ex-girlfriend known as Freakoffs, where again, as you just heard Williams say and describe, using commercial sex workers. In that civil case, his former ex-girlfriend saying that he would force her to take part in these things, and when she resisted, there would be physical violence. So we did learn more about the details within this document, this indictment, but it also is missing specifics about how many people are actually connected to the indictment. A lot of the allegations coincide with the civil lawsuit that we reported to you about in November of last year. Again, that was highly covered because it was settled within 24 hours, even though Combs maintained that he didn't do anything wrong.
Well, Jerika, and we also know officials say this investigation is still ongoing. What more do we know about that? Because when I hear that, I wonder if there are more charges that could potentially happen.
Literally, Williams said, "We are not done." He then gave a 1-800 number asking people to call if they have any information or have any tips that they want to give. They also talked about that other charges, they are, quote, not taking them off the table. So while the focus is on Sean Diddy Combs, and so many people know him across the world, obviously in this country because of his contribution to the music industry, that's what a lot of people are interested in. But what you heard from Williams was an indicator that there are possibly more charges to come, more people involved in this business empire, they said, that was led by Sean Diddy Combs.
And thus the scene we see there behind you at the courthouse. Jerika Duncan, we appreciate that report so much. What a scene. What a scene and what a time. All right, so jumping the map now to Florida as the feds investigate the apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Florida officials now say they want to launch their own criminal investigation. In fact, Governor Ron DeSantis says his state's investigators need to do an entirely independent look at that suspect, Ryan Wesley Ruth, who is accused of trying to assassinate the former president at his golf club in West Palm Beach over the weekend. Here's his why.
In my judgment, it's not in the best interest of our state or our nation to have the same federal agencies that are seeking to prosecute Donald Trump leading this investigation, especially when the most serious, straightforward offense constitutes a violation of state law, but not federal law. In addition to holding the suspect accountable, the public deserves to know the truth about how this assassination came to be.
So that's one perspective. Meanwhile, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland also addressed the investigation today. Listen.
The FBI is continuing to investigate the apparent assassination attempt of the former president that occurred on Sunday in Florida. We are grateful that he is safe. The entire Justice Department, including in particular the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida, the National Security Division, are all coordinating closely with our local, state law enforcement partners on the ground. We will all work together to tirelessly determine accountability in this matter. We will spare no resource in this investigation.
All right, so now a federal and a state investigation. CBS News national correspondent Manny Bajorquez joins us now from West Palm Beach. Manny, cell phone data really is quite revealing about the suspect in this case. He was able to camp out for hours. How was he able to do that and go undetected?
Well, that really is the big question. That cell phone data, according to the criminal complaint against Ryan Routh, saying that he was in the area there around the perimeter from 2 a.m. on Saturday until he was discovered 1:30 in the afternoon on Sunday, and even had a bag of food, an indication that he planned to be there as long as it took. What we do know is that the Secret Service wasn't able to do what they would have done had this been a planned event, is a sweep of the golf course, because according to investigators, it was a off-the-record, last-minute outing. That being said, it is very well known that when the president is at Mar-a-Lago, as he still is right now on Sundays, he typically does go out for golf. So did the suspect in this case just take a chance and think he may be there and I'm going to go? Fortunately, that Secret Service member spotted the muzzle of the gun pointing through the fence and fired at the suspect, making him flee. He was later arrested just north of us in Martin County.
Manny, thank you so much for that update. Much more to come, we're sure, on this story. Thank you very much. Well, meanwhile, while in Georgia boosting voter registration, the vice presidential nominee over on the Democrat side, Tim Walz, he spoke about the most recent assassination attempt against the former president. Listen.
Before we get started, everybody, I think it is worth noting what happened yesterday and what happened with President Trump in Florida. Horrific situation. Thankful to Secret Service, folks you see, law enforcement, and grateful that the president is safe. And I think all of us know we don't solve our differences in this country with violence. We condemn it in all its forms.
Walz is wrapping up his visit to Georgia before heading out to North Carolina, where he will deliver remarks in Asheville, North Carolina, a little bit later today. All right, when we come back, we have more coverage from the campaign trail. Listen, we are not far away from that vice presidential debate, certainly not far away from the day America decides. CBS News 24/7 back after the break. CBS News 24/7 following breaking news in Houston at this hour. A police officer shot. That officer fired on while responding to some sort of a home invasion in this neighborhood. You're looking live into the neighborhood as the investigation continues. That officer's not there, rushed to a hospital right now from where the bullets flew. You're looking at video from Houston's northwest side. So far, no update on that officer's condition. Details are very limited. Obviously, the search for answers is still a very big deal in that neighborhood. We can tell you of arrests and a manhunt, 2 people detained, and officers are out on the streets all throughout Houston looking for a third. So as soon as we learn more, we'll bring it to you right here on CBS News 24/7. Let's move on our map now to Kentucky, where deputies mourn the loss of one of their own. In Russell County, Kentucky, a deputy shot and killed in the line of duty. This happened in Russell Springs, which is about 100 miles outside of Louisville. 3-year veteran Deputy Josh Phipps shot and killed while trying to find a suspect in the night. More from the sheriff's office expected later today. Our crews will be there. Striking factory workers and bosses at Boeing will meet face-to-face with Federal Reserve mediators in the room. That happens today. This comes after last week's rejection by workers to a contract Boeing first offered. Workers want better pay. They say they will dig in their heels and stay out there on the picket lines to fight to get it. Boeing, by the way, faces losing $1 billion or more if that strike does not come to an end soon. A busy day for social media giant Meta. Did you hear about this? It could affect your teenagers. So 2 major developments to really break down and tell you about. First, the social media giant banning Russian state media outlets. That ban comes as the U.S. accuses a state-run Russian television operation called RT of funneling money to secretly fund influence campaigns on social media channels like Instagram. By the way, RT was forced to stop formal operations in the United States because of sanctions after Russia invaded Ukraine. Meanwhile, the teenager in your life might see some changes when using Instagram. Meta, that owns Instagram, automatically putting tens of millions of users under the age of 18 into new Instagram accounts. They're called Instagram Teen. That move will migrate over the next 60 days, so watch for it. It will in part make teen users' accounts private, only allowing them to receive messages from people that they follow or are connected to, and it will limit exposure to sensitive content like videos of people fighting. Let's jump the map now to the state of Texas, where we continue watching live and in real time that massive pipeline explosion we brought to you as breaking news right here on CBS News 24/7 yesterday. By today, we know that explosion forced a lot of evacuations and injured at least 4 people. Among the injured, we can tell you now, a firefighter. This all happening in the community of Deer Park, which is a suburb of Houston. Authorities say that fire started yesterday morning when someone drove an SUV right through a fence, then hit a valve on a liquid natural gas pipeline. So once again, that's a live image right there. We can tell you it's decreased by about 3/4 from what we showed you on live TV yesterday. CBS News correspondent Janet Shamlian is live where officials wait for the fire to burn out. Janet, it looks like it is burning itself out slowly. What are you seeing right here from the scene?
Reed, yesterday at this time, flames were shooting up in the air behind us at this exact location. Now, at least from this vantage point, we can't see them. We know that it's still burning, but as you said, about 75% diminished. And authorities are telling us right now that it could be out within a matter of a couple of hours. This is the street which has the most impact. There's no power here right now. We've seen people coming and going throughout the day. They're picking up their things that they need. Most of them are staying with friends or at hotels. And several of them said they've had really very little communication from the company. There's a number that they can call, but they've heard nothing back, and they're hoping to receive some compensation for the expenses that they've had over the past 24 hours or so. For the most impacted homes at the end of the street, those that have either caught fire or have water damage from firefighters trying to save those homes, those people won't be back in for a while, at least until that fire is out and that the area around it has cooled. As you can imagine, even though the fire has diminished, Reed, still very close to it, it is incredibly hot.
Well, we can see the singe marks here on some of this video that we're showing, this live video right now. This is a neighborhood story, really. We saw yesterday on CBS News 24/7 an active firefight at a home right across the street. What can you tell us about the people that we showed there when it looked like they were losing their home?
They have not been able to get back in and assess damage. Only authorities and first responders are down there right now. A lot of the people I talked to told me that, they knew they were living close to these pipelines. It's in a public easement, which allows public utilities to put these there. And they've never had problems before, but this is a very heavily petrochemical area. In fact, 40% of the nation's petrochemical capacity is right here in Southeast Texas.
Janet, we know when news breaks in Texas, you are the go-to gal. We appreciate always your excellent live reporting. Thank you very much. So our video feeds now take us to North Carolina, where floodwaters surged into homes, stranded cars, even forced water rescues. Look at this. This is video from Carolina Beach. This is about 10 miles away from Wilmington. And Jess, let's bring you in here because they say this is a once-in-a-thousand-year storm.
In a lot of ways, the potential tropical cyclone A impacted people further than it would if it was, a strong storm or a strong system moving its way through. There's still rotation from the storm too, and as we take a quick look at what's happening for us throughout the next 24 hours, Futurecast is showing the remnants left over from that potential tropical cyclone as it moves its way up into areas like Delaware, all the way up into Pennsylvania, impacting many people with widespread flooding damage. And of course, storm surge was the big concern as the system was moving inland from offshore just in North Carolina and South Carolina yesterday. Now, our excessive rainfall outlook is showing a slight risk in areas like Richmond, stretching all along those outer banks, but we continue to stretch all the way over into areas like Kentucky, for example, where they're still getting impacted with heavy rain from this too. So in total, we could see about an additional 1 to 3 inches, but localized flooding is still a major concern. The National Weather Service has issued flood advisories and watches and warnings for all of this area as we head into the next 24 hours. The next 48 hours, we could see an additional 2 inches of rain over there too. We'll have more on what's going on in the Rockies in just a bit, but let's actually take a look at what's happening for us stretching over into the East Coast first. We're going to break up today's forecast in 2 different sections. The East Coast still dealing with 70s in the forecast on top of that impactful rain. And as we head into the coming days, we're going to see all the damage left over from it. I'll have more on that in a bit, but for now, back to you, Reed.
All right, Jess, thank you so much. Our video feeds now take us overseas. This video gives us an aerial view of just how widespread the flooding is in the Czech Republic. Rooftops there looking like their front porches. At least 16 people dead because of the flooding all across Europe. Our best thoughts with the people there. And look at this, evacuations by helicopter seen on our monitors from Poland. This video shows us training in action. Somebody plucked out of the waters up into a helicopter, and look at that. It takes a team, it takes some skill, and look at that, they did it. A natural disaster status announced by Poland's government in some of the hardest hit areas. When we come back on CBS News 24/7, we're going to be talking about what's going on the campaign trail. We've got a vice presidential candidate on the Republican side. We're waiting to see if he has anything to say about that assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump. We're also checking in on Kamala Harris. She's about to speak to a group of journalists. We're going to be asking the question, what will they ask her? Because Kamala Harris has not had a lot to say to journalists in recent weeks. We'll be right back. Our CBS News cameras and crews following candidates for president working to get out the vote on this National Voter Registration Day. Vice President Kamala Harris will speak shortly with the National Association of Black Journalists. It's a private event one day after President Biden praised his administration's investments in historically black colleges and universities. And later tonight, former President Donald Trump will appear in Flint, Michigan. He's going to speak on the auto industry and on inflation. Also in Michigan, Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, speaking at any moment. And that's where we find CBS News campaign reporter Torian Small. Torian, what are you going to tell us about this speech? And by the way, we want to let our viewers know there's about a 4-second delay here. So now Torian will take it away, but just know there's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, Reed, we are expecting to hear J.D. Vance really touch on the assassination attempt that happened to former President Trump over the weekend. He, for the first time publicly, gave remarks on it, weighed in, said that he had spoken with the former president during a faith and family freedom, conservative, religious, evangelical event yesterday. But a good portion of that speech was more on the jokey side. He made jokes about it before making a hard left turn into accusing Democrats of fanning the flames of fiery rhetoric that in his mind plays a part or is contributing to these rash or surges in political violence in his mind. We're also expecting to hear him talk about the Haitian migrant crisis, what he's calling a crisis in Ohio, specifically in Springfield, Illinois. He took a lot of hits over the weekend before that during the debate, the presidential debate, for spreading baseless rumors that Haitian migrants in the community have been eating the cats and geese of the community. It was untrue according to the local officials there in Ohio. And then we saw after that an increase in death threats, bomb threats to the community. The local municipality there is calling for federal officials to tamp down on that rhetoric. Since then, though, we know that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump have only spoken more about it.
Well, and J.D. Vance unapologetic so far about anything he said or the impact of that which he has sort of amplified there. All right, Torian, thank you so much. You and, of course, Dolly Parton, who is being played on the speakers right now. We appreciate you. We wanted to show you a look into candidate Kamala Harris's travels at this hour. You know, just moments ago, Harris departed Joint Base Andrews to make her way to that National Association of Black Journalists panel that's taking place in Philadelphia. That's where we find CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro. He's there in Philadelphia watching the Harris campaign. So, Aaron, Kamala Harris has come under fire by journalists in recent days and weeks that she really hasn't been completely accessible to the press. What do we expect that conversation to be like today?
Reed, good to be with you. We expect it to be a similar format as the one that former President Trump did with NABJ in Chicago earlier this year. There will be 3 moderators, one with the griot, a black NPR and Politico, as well as Vice President Harris, of course, on that stage. They are expected to press her on issues such as her record as a prosecutor, where she stands on the economy and immigration issues pertinent not just to Black American voters, but all voters that have said in polls these are the topics they want to hear more from Vice President Harris on. And as you mentioned, she has not done many press interviews. The campaign says they are ramping that up. She did an interview today with popular Spanish language radio host Chiqui Baby, where she talked about the attempted Trump assassination attempt, saying that she condemns all forms of political violence.
And we know her running mate, the governor, Tim Walz, also echoed that very same thing today. Aaron, thank you so much for that live report. All right, so we know Donald Trump has said there will be no more debates with Kamala Harris, but voters can see the candidates for vice president debate one another. CBS News will host the only vice presidential debate between Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz on Tuesday. That's October 1st, happening in New York, and you can catch our live coverage on CBS and streaming on CBS News 24/7 and on Paramount+. Let's take a live look at the White House right now, where President Joe Biden will be meeting with the president of the World Bank soon to discuss poverty and climate change. Now, the climate change part of that conversation looming large on the president's mind after he got a briefing on wildfire season. States like California have seen massive and devastating fires recently, especially down in Southern California. Meanwhile, Mother Nature drew a circle around Denver and getting ready to send a dart in the form of storms there. That is a city getting prepared. Jessica Birch watching for those of you who are in Colorado and bracing.
Yeah, these afternoon thunderstorms anywhere from Colorado stretching all the way over into the Rockies, from Idaho all the way down into New Mexico. We're going to be seeing a stretch of storms really impacting this region throughout the afternoon hours today as that storm line continues to track off into Kansas and Nebraska as we head into the evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. So the severe weather outlook right now really has an enhanced risk bullseyed over areas through Kansas and through Nebraska. But this also impacts areas like Colorado, where we could see large hail stretching anywhere from the Dakotas all the way down into New Mexico into the evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. Damaging winds is also a big concern too. I was just looking at Wyoming's forecast. There's wind advisories stretched all throughout that state right now, but really it is isolated with that 30% risk into areas closer to Nebraska. We continue to monitor that area closely. We head all the way up into Montana now, a tornado threat from this exact same stream of storms that's starting to billow in that region. So let's actually take a look just below me real fast at what it's shaping out to be for that spot, or those spots anywhere from Colorado near Denver, where you saw those cool clouds kind of just hanging over the city before that storm comes in. Today we're going to be sitting mostly in the 80s throughout that area. 70s up into Minnesota. We're going to continue to keep a close eye on our community members all the way down into New Mexico too, because this is an impressive storm stretching throughout most of the states there. And I'll have more on what's happening for us as we head into the next couple of days for our friends over in the Carolinas too.
I always feel so lucky to step on these maps. Pretty cool. Thanks, Jess. Hey, when we come back, we're going to take you live to our nation's capital and talk to CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. So much happening on Capitol Hill. One of the biggest things, can lawmakers agree and get a spending bill done in time before a looming government shutdown? Yes Once again, that is in sight. We'll see their work and break it all apart, plus more legislation on their tables when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. Our video monitors take us live back to Capitol Hill. The House expected to vote tomorrow on a bill to fund the government with just 2 weeks until the money runs out. So let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Nicole, this measure is getting a lot of pushback there on Capitol Hill, on both sides, really. So break it down for us.
Yeah, it did, so much so that the speaker had to pull a vote on this just recently, but now he is making another go at it tomorrow with a vote expected on what's called a continuing resolution, which is a short-term spending bill that would fund the government through March. But there would also be a separate provision attached to this called the SAVE Act, which in essence requires you to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote. It blocks those who don't have U.S. citizenship from voting. I mean, that's pretty standard. So some are questioning why that's even an issue because many see it as a non-issue. So for that reason, many Democrats are opposed to this measure because they see that as a poison pill. The speaker, however, pushing it because they do want this to be an issue in this election. And so some see this more so as a messaging bill or an attempt to message on this issue. But even within the Republican conference, there has been some disagreement over this bill, not just with respect to that particular measure, but also just with respect to the funding measure as a whole. Some feel that it should be more fiscally prudent than it is. They don't want to keep funding the government at the same level. So that is why there was some internal wrangling over this last week, which is why the speaker pulled it. But he's putting it forth again, knowing potentially that it could be dead on arrival. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer indicated as much earlier today that it likely won't stand a chance if it does end up passing the House tomorrow.
So, Nicole, let's talk about the Secret Service. You know, yesterday we heard President Joe Biden outside the White House saying the Secret Service needed some extra help. They needed to get some more dollars and some more resources. Now we understand Congress is also considering and perhaps answering that call, not only from President Biden, but others to get a little bit more help after that second assassination attempt against Donald Trump. What can you tell us about the progress there?
Yeah, that's right. Well, even within these discussions about government funding, it has been raised whether or not there should be some additional provision or funding added to the Secret Service within that broader spending request, or whether that gets broken out separately. We do know that the administration put forth a request for additional funding just last month before this latest incident transpired. But by and large, from both sides of the aisle, there does seem to be interest in making sure that the Secret Service has the resources it needs, although a short time ago the speaker seemed to pour some cold water on that idea, saying that they are looking into additional funding for the Secret Service, but at the same time they don't want to throw more money at what they see as a broken problem.
Okay, so Nicole, stay with us because we want to ask you about something. Before we let you go, we know the Senate is expected to take on that bill that would protect access to IVF, which is a huge narrative here in the campaign. Leader Chuck Schumer talked about it ahead of today's vote. We want to roll that sound. Listen.
Sadly, as we've learned this year, access to IVF can no longer be taken for granted. From the moment the MAGA Supreme Court eliminated Roe, the hard right made clear that they'd keep going. In Alabama this year, we saw just how vulnerable IVF has become as the next target of ultra-conservatives. Since then, we've seen Republicans tie themselves in knots over their support for IVF, claiming they support access to IVF, support insurance paying for IVF treatments, support helping families pay for IVF. And then, when the rubber hits the road, they vote no.
All right, so Nicole, it sounds like Chuck Schumer is teeing up a discussion that they want to stay in the narrative this election season.
Well, and that's how you know it is election season when we're in the peak of it right now. You know, we talked earlier about Republicans trying to do messaging bills around this issue of election integrity. Well, similarly, Senate Democrats also trying to keep this issue of reproductive rights in the headlines. And so this vote that they will be taking is similar, again, to a vote that was taken earlier this summer where Republicans blocked this effort to try to codify more protections for IVF. And what Democrats are trying to do here is almost kind of make this a wedge issue for Republicans, because we know that former President Trump has been clear that he is supportive of IVF. It is something that if he were to get another term, that his administration would look into providing more support to families around it. And so Chuck Schumer is kind of trying to call Republicans bluff. Well, if you stand with your standard bearer, then you would support a bill like this. But in all likelihood, Republicans will likely block this again.
Sometimes I wonder, Nicole Killian, if you ever sleep. You have to be a Rolodex. You have to have a masterclass ability to study all of this legislation and know what you're going to talk about, and every time you knock it out of the park. Thank you so much for guiding us through it. So all eyes are on the vice presidential nominees today. Both J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, they're campaigning in key battleground states. Listen, less than 50 days left until Election Day. So Vance is tackling the swing state of Michigan, prime political real estate there. In fact, just moments ago, he had this to say addressing a crowd in Sparta about the apparent assassination attempt against former President Trump.
I want to just address the elephant in the room here, which is, of course, just a couple of days ago, my running mate, my dear friend and our next president, was nearly assassinated again. 2 assassination attempts in as many months, and I think that it's time to say to the Democrats, to the media, to everybody that has been attacking this man and trying to censor this man for going on 10 years, cut it out or you're going to get somebody killed. Now, I actually, of course, heard about the news before almost anybody else. I was sitting at home with my son, and we were doing, what we always do when my wife's not around. We were playing video games. We get that like 1 hour. All right, we can play video games, and then before Mom comes back, we got to cut that crap out. Sorry, honey. I just told on myself. But we're sitting there, and I get a phone call. It says Donald J. Trump, so I answer it. And he says, JD, you won't believe it. They just tried to do it again. I said, what did they try to do? He said, well, they just tried to shoot me again. And I said, what? No way. I almost couldn't believe it when he first told me, and I said, oh, my God, sir, I'm so glad you're okay, but, you're physically okay. Clearly, you wouldn't be calling me. Are you okay in all the ways that matter? And he said, yeah, I'm doing fine. And that's just who he is. He just gets shot, almost shot a second time, and he's totally fine. He was a little annoyed about one thing, though. He was mad because he was on the 6th hole, and he was about to make a birdie putt. And he said, I'm kind of pissed off they wouldn't let me finish my birdie. I was having the round of my life, and I said, well, okay, sir, I think it makes sense, though, that they got you off the golf course. But, it goes to show there is a difference in leadership style. There is a guy who takes a bullet to the head and stands up and says, fight, fight, fight. There is a guy who takes a second almost assassination attempt and responds to it with grace and good humor. And then there's a woman who is terrified of the American media. Who do we think ought to be the President of the United States? Donald J. Trump.
All right, listening to the comments of Senator J.D. Vance at a rally there in Michigan talking about that assassination attempt against Donald Trump. And the conversation continues. When we see it, you see it. CBS News 24/7 monitoring social media. And right now, we just got this video posted to the social media platform X from Donald Trump's communications director. And there he is shaking the hands of the people who are wearing badges. Who are they? They are with the sheriff's department that was quick to act after the Secret Service spotted Mr. Ruth, who was waiting in the bushes outside that golf club with an AR-style weapon. So this is video just now hitting social media of the former president greeting these officers. You see them pointing to the 2 officers there on the left. Those officers are the ones who were first to respond. Also, there's an emerging story right now in the zeitgeist that a quick-thinking bystander, a citizen, was able to also direct police when they saw something that didn't seem right and were able to get that quick response. So we just wanted to turn that video around and show you that Donald Trump is meeting with and thanking the deputies, people who, no matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, stand there shoulder to shoulder to continue doing their jobs here in these United States. Our video feeds now take us to North Carolina, where floodwater made it difficult to get around. Look at that. That's a boat in a street where cars are supposed to be. In fact, they're paddleboarding there on that boat. This is a view from Carolina Beach, about 10 miles away from Wilmington. And Jess, this is just the eventual reality when a storm dumps that much rain in that short amount of time.
Exactly, and this isn't an ordinary storm. This was supposed to be a named hurricane, potentially. It ended up not being the case because by the time it made its way inland, it was already starting to decay. However, we're still seeing the leftovers from potential Tropical Cyclone 8. all throughout the Carolinas, stretching its way up into states like Pennsylvania and Delaware right now. Taking a look behind me, I want to show you what this is shaping out to be for us over into the Carolinas. South Carolina is starting to dry up, but this system continues to track north. The leftovers from this tropical cyclone, potential tropical cyclone, continues to impact areas like West Virginia all the way over into our coastlines, where there's still advisories right now. Flood watches, warnings, and advisories are wide stretched throughout this region. And we take a look at the excessive rainfall outlook over here too. A slight risk in cities like Norfolk, stretching up into Richmond, where they are dealing with heavy rain and flooding like you just saw too, but there's still that marginal risk that stretches its way all the way over into the rest of North Carolina too, stretching over into West Virginia, and of course up north into Philadelphia. We can see really heavy rain impacts from this exact system, anywhere from 1 to 3 inches still expected for now. We continue to keep a close eye on that, but I'll have more on what we can expect over in the Rockies heading into the next couple hours in just a bit, Reed.
All right, thanks. So we are watching testimony into the tragedy that happened when a submersible imploded on its way to the Titanic. Today, a key employee who called the Titan submersible unsafe testified before U.S. Coast Guard investigators just a little while ago. 5 people died, including OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush. Well, David Lockridge is the former operations director for OceanGate. He says he clashed with Rush and felt the company only cared about making money.
I don't like being bullied into anything. I don't tolerate liars. And if I see something that is a risk, not only to myself, to anybody else, I will put my hand up. The whole idea behind the company was to make money. That's it. There was very little in the way of science.
So his testimony, Mr. Lockridge, comes a day after other witnesses raised some safety concerns at OceanGate and then told those investigators about it. The company based in Washington State suspended all operations after that tragedy and the implosion. We have new details about the fallout from the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore as we look at the wreckage back in April 2023. 3 families of 6 immigrant workers killed in that accident now seeking legal action against the owner of the ship that hit that bridge. They want to hold the company liable for their deaths. Here's some of what they had to say.
Grace Ocean Private has chosen the path of impunity over the path of justice, driving by profit and self-interest. Their action seeks to erase accountability they owe to these families, to these men whose lives were stolen, but will not let that happen.
The attorney there vowing to fight if the court approves that request from these families, and they'll do that next week. The families could file a request for financial compensation for the deaths of every one of their loved ones. All right, when we come back, we're going to take you to Texas. This breaking news scene playing out live right now in a Houston, Texas neighborhood. An officer shot, rushed to the hospital. Now there's a manhunt. Police, they've arrested some people, but they're on the search for a third person. We'll take you live to that neighborhood when we come back. CBS News 24/7 and our video monitors here behind us take us to Kentucky, where a manhunt is still happening for a dangerous suspect. The suspect accused of shooting at cars along that busy interstate. 5 people injured, and that's what started this manhunt. The Laurel County Sheriff's deputies identified 32-year-old Joseph Couch as that suspect number 1. They found an AR-15 in a car, and they've linked it to him by today. You saw the affidavit there in the video a second ago. That shows that the suspect sent a text message before the shooting saying he was, quote, going to kill a lot of people and then himself, close quote. Well, state officials say they are now expanding their search. Listen.
We'll begin transitioning state and local law enforcement agencies from a manhunt to a larger presence in this community and the surrounding communities. The search will continue through the monitoring of cameras and the use of aircraft where available. And again, these groups behind me will continue to follow up all credible leads about his whereabouts and continue to investigate all of them. In other words, all 3 missions will continue. But today we're announcing that we are reallocating resources because we believe it is necessary now to do so to provide for the best safety outcomes for our citizens.
So why do they need boots on the ground like that and more resources? Well, you see the area off to the side of the road. It is dense, not only in trees, but also in rock formations. There's some intelligence out there that suggests this guy's hunkered down in a cave. He may be there for a while. They want to smoke him out, and they want to put him in jail. By the way, 4 of the 5 victims have been released from the hospital. We are continuing to follow that breaking news out of Houston right now. A police officer takes a bullet. That officer fired on while responding to a home invasion. The officer rushed to a hospital from where the bullets flew in Houston's northwest side. You're looking at live video right now where police are amassing an army to try to investigate. So far, no update on the officer's condition because details are limited. They are right now just trying to get a manhunt going. We can tell you there have been some arrests, 2 people detained. Officers are also searching for a 3rd person. So we'll continue watching this Houston neighborhood live and in real time. And as soon as we learn more, we'll bring it to you right here on CBS News 24/7. Hey, this just in, and what a story. The Fed's investigating a series of suspicious letters containing white powder of some sort sent to election officials in several states. The conversation in our nation about election security, now we're learning about these letters containing that powdery substance. In fact, the FBI just released this statement, quote, "Some of the letters contain an unknown substance, and we are working closely with our law enforcement partners to respond to each incident and safely collect the letters." They also went on to say, "We're working with our partners to determine how many letters were sent, the individual or individuals responsible for the letters, and the motive behind the letters." That's from the FBI. New video to our monitors out of Lebanon, and get this, you can hear it right there in your ear. The sirens going. Why? Chaotic scenes as ambulances rush in. Hundreds of handheld pagers exploded, and they blew up simultaneously all across Lebanon. In fact, blew up in hands and on belts in Syria as well. 9 dead. More fatalities expected. Among the dead, members of the militant group Hezbollah. More than 2,700 people injured in these pager blasts. Officials blame Israel, but so far in this early development of the story, no word from the Israeli military. Our live feeds now take us to Denver, where that city braces for storms. It looks pretty good there in Denver right now, but we know weather can change right there over the Rockies, Jess.
Within the next few hours, that's when we're going to start seeing the Rockies really act up with heavy storms stretching all along those states. I mean, we're already starting to see those clouds really build just on the leading edge of it. Once it hits all that turbulent or all that higher elevated areas, that's when the air becomes more turbulent. That's when we start to see more severe storms as it makes its way closer to Kansas, stretching over into Nebraska. So taking a look behind me real fast on Futurecast, timing out this storm in full force, it is going to cause some localized flooding for states anywhere from Utah stretching over into Colorado. We can also continue to keep a close eye on strong winds too. Thunderstorms are expected throughout the afternoon hours today, early morning hours tomorrow as that continues to move its way off into Nebraska, down into Kansas. We will see more clear conditions into the forecast late tomorrow. However, our severe weather outlook still showing that enhanced risk really bullseyed over Nebraska just on that front side of it. As that storm pushes its way off into the east, we could see hail. We could also see damaging winds throughout the region, anywhere from Montana, stretching all the way down into states like New Mexico. So we go right back up to Montana. A light tornado risk as we head into the afternoon hours today from this exact same system. We're going to continue to monitor the damage from this in the next couple days, but it is a fast-moving system, Reed.
All right, talking about fast-moving, new details on that story we just brought you out of Lebanon and Syria about the pagers that blew up, killing some members of Hezbollah. Fingers pointed at Israel, but now the U.S. is responding. They say they had nothing to do with it. The State Department saying they are investigating. When we hear it, you'll hear it on CBS News 24/7.